The journey is conversations with ordinary people about stories of transformation and how we may have had setbacks in our life and how we persevered through those, how we've learned from those obstacles, and how they've maybe helped us on our path today. Well, welcome to The Journey. My name is Kevin Polky, and I am the host of The Journey. And today we have a special guest, Adam Shafer. Actually, I know Adam via his wife, Michelle, has been a counselor and a great asset to the Rockford area, working as a licensed marriage and family therapist for KP. And as a result, when we would have Christmas parties or whatever it would be for KP, before I had moved on to Four Corners, Adam, you'd be joining Michelle, and then on social media, I've gotten to see as your family has grown and the different things that have gone on with your family as well. And I think one of the benefits of social media is to be able to see how individuals what interests are and families are. But so Adam, just one of the questions as I welcome you to come on the show is we always ask of what does Adam do when you have an opportunity to have fun? What do you do for fun?
Definitely try to do something fun activities with the kids and my wife Michelle. So we will, go to the park. We will go to. They like to go to trampoline parks. They like to go to, a variety of different things there. If I get a chance to, I like to exercise. So Michelle and I will go for walks. We'll go, to the gym, things like that. Um, Other than that, just kind of relaxing too is always good.
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
So sitting
exactly.
down, yeah,
Yeah. And how many kids do you have?
three.
Three.
One
And they're
oldest is a girl, and then I have two boys.
okay. And their age range is from where to where?
My daughter will be 9 in July, and then I have a son that's 6, and then my youngest is 15 months.
And that is why resting is one of those things you want to do for fun, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a pretty busy ages of those of that span. So
Mhm.
so Adam, maybe tell us a little bit about are you from the Rockford area? I know you guys are planted here now. Have you always been from the Rockford area?
No, I haven't. I'm from a small town in Manteno, Illinois. It is over by like Bourbonnais, Kankakee area. Hour south of Chicago is usually what we tell people, so they kind of get an idea of where we're at. Small town. We moved up here. We actually went to NIU together to get our master's degrees, and then I got a internship slash position at OSF St. Anthony. So that's how we ended up staying in the Rockford area. And of course, Michelle became a counselor. So
So yeah, so tell us a little bit about yeah, your from a background standpoint, and then what you got your master's in, and what do you do for OSF?
so I got my bachelor's and master's in nutrition food science. So I became a dietitian down the road. And then I worked as an outpatient dietitian at OSF St. Anthony Medical Center, started out there, became the bariatric coordinator slash wellness coordinator. So I was coordinating programs in that. And then now I'm currently the clinical nutrition manager. So I oversee the outpatient, inpatient dietitians as well as the dietary food service at OSF.
And I know that in general, people will may think they know what a dietitian does, especially for within the hospital system. But maybe if you could kind of clarify or explain what what is a role of a dietitian, then versus or the benefit of going to a dietitian over just Googling something and looking something up for this particular, you know, uh, type of diet plan.
Well, information on internet can be, biased from, third parties. They could be trying to sell a certain product and things like that. It could be very opinionated. It could be a variety of things. With the dietitian, the great thing about that is they can work with where you're at. So, if you have financial constraints, if you have other health conditions that are conflicting, you can look up a weight loss plan online, but it doesn't take into account that you have diabetes and maybe you have cardiac issues. You can't follow everything just for weight loss if you have two other health conditions conflicting. So that's where the dietitian comes in because they can take everything that's going on with you personally and make a plan that's personal to you. So factoring the fact that, hey, I need to watch your blood sugar because you're diabetic, in addition to, you're taking these supplements, are they truly worth what you're trying to get out of them? Or, are you having too much of certain supplements because now they're, you have vitamin D here, you have vitamin D here. Well, they get stored in your body more. So, all these different things that I think the internet kind of glosses over. And that's what the dietitian is for, is to kind of get, more specific and focus in on that individual rather than just having blanket statements. And this is what you should eat for 7 days. Like, no one's going to be able to eat the same things over and over again, too.
Yeah.
So that's another reason.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think probably the biggest thing that it just kind of stood out to me when you were just talking about the idea of individualizing based upon what is going on with that. Not only what may be going on with them medically, but then what is their history, what is their tendencies, what is the things that they have an aversion to, even if it's a particular taste aversion to it versus their body could process it. So that's what it sounds like.
well, and obviously too, I mean, the emotional side of it too. We have emotional eating going on. Maybe that's why they're having issues, or maybe so you have to factor in that and talk to them how you cope with stress eating and
Yeah.
you cope with, so.
You mentioned one of the jobs that you had at OSF, which is a hospital system here in the Rockford area, and I know it's originates down in Peoria, and
Mhm.
Rockford has a huge presence in the Rockford area. You talked about bariatric, and so could you just maybe give us just a snapshot of what is bariatric?
So bariatric surgery is weight loss surgery that people have to lose significant amount of weight. You have to have a certain criteria to even have the surgery. Of course, you have your BMI has to be a certain amount of weight. You've had to attempt multiple different ways of losing weight and have it documented by a doctor, weight loss groups, things like that. There's different types of surgeries. There's gastric bypass, there's gastric sleeve, there's gastric lap band, things like that, that you can kind of pick and choose based on, again, your medical history and then your kind of personal preferences too. Of they all had kind of varying severity of um, um, like severity of surgery, of how much they need to do to you, and then pros and cons of post-surgery care. So, your diet will be slightly different based on the different surgeries. They all require a lot of change, but they're meant to help greatly reduce your hunger and hopefully sustain a healthier lifestyle so you can keep off the weight after you lose it.
For me, in my family, uh, my father, who had throughout his entire life, from a young person all the way through his life, had always gone up and down and gone on different diets and lost weight and gained weight back and done that. And at the point when he was in his late 50s, I think at least at that time, the cutoff was that you had to have you weren't a candidate for the surgery if you reached 60. And so he was at
Okay.
59. He was, and again, this was years ago now, but he was somewhere between 530, 540 pounds. Um, I remember there was time periods in, as I was growing up, that his weight was more at like 220. And so this was a significant, a weight gain at that point. And he had the surgery, and he then got back down to the low 300s at that time period. Um, and pretty much probably maintained around that low 300s. um I know in our case, though I think he had complications with it because he didn't follow necessarily a nutritional plan or diet plan afterwards. But it definitely extended his life and the quality of his life, that I don't believe would have been, because when he was at that weight pre-surgery, he was pretty immobile, not socializing, not leaving the house. There was a lot of other factors that played into it. Like I said, because he didn't necessarily follow the nutritional piece afterwards, he lost weight, but I don't know if he was getting the nutrients he needed,
Right. A lot of
because
malabsorption after the surgery, so you have to
yeah,
take extra supplements just to absorb enough.
yeah,
So,
and so I think that was definitely a part that was lacking. So the one goal was achieved, but the mental aspect of his relationship with food wasn't necessarily changing at the same rate and I think that's one of the elements that dietitians can definitely play a part and help with. So yeah, thank you for sharing
no
about
problem.
that piece. I know that one of the things the last time I saw Michelle, she had told me about that you had, through OSF and through their interest, with the concept of blue zones. And I wasn't familiar with the concept, or I'd heard about it, but I wasn't that familiar with it. And so maybe if you could just mention what is blue zones, and then what is some of the driving forces of why OSF was interested in that, and how you became interested.
Yeah, so blue zones is basically it's a term that identifies which regions in the world are living the longest. So most of these regions that they have identified as a blue zone are living over 100 years old, and their quality of life is just unmatched to anything that we're used to seeing. Again, we have 90-year-olds that are herding sheep and riding horses, and they're doing things that we typically never see it, in America. And so that is just amazing. So what they did is they researched those different regions to kind of come up with, what are they doing differently than everyone else in the world? And they've come up with, what they call a power nine of all these different areas and things that these people are doing. And a lot of it is related to, it's not just exercise and eating, which is, I think, what we're stuck with in America is we're thinking always exercise and eating is the key, but it is. But also we have to consider the social and the spiritual, emotional aspects of it all. So that's something else that they talked about too in, the research that they did. OSF came into the picture because they were interested in this, and the lead researcher in Blue Zones has come up with a way they're trying to imitate it or kind of like recreate a blue zone in communities and work sites. Well, OSF has decided to become a work site um, certified blue zone. And this actually is the first time they've ever had anyone do this that wasn't part of a community already. So they've kind of OSF is kind of a pioneer in this. That hey, I know Rockford's not a community yet, a blue zone community yet, but we want to do it. So they did surveys and trying to figure out what our current climate is, our atmosphere, what are we doing for wellness, all that stuff. And then they gave us a blueprint. This blueprint focuses on, again, those different areas, like um, some of the areas, for example, cultivate social networks, foster purpose. If someone has purpose, they will get out of bed every day and know exactly what they want to do. They have a drive, and that purpose will change as you get older. And that's something that I think a lot of people have a hard time too. Um, Other things is just transforming the environment to make the healthy choice the easy choice. That's something they talk about a lot. So is there sidewalks around your campus? Are the vending machines healthier? Is the cafeteria healthier? At least it doesn't have to be, again, everything doesn't have to be healthy per se, but you got to have those options available. So those that want to do it can, and it's easy for them to do so. Um, so those are some of the changes. We to implement those changes. For example, we did at OSF indoor and outdoor walking paths. We have a very beautiful, like wooded outdoor walking path that's part of our campus. They've I've helped redo our vending machines, kind of do our contract, redo our contract for what they're going to supply in there, so that 50% of them are going to be considered healthy. We've become a certified cafeteria now. So the food, for example, in blue zones, they found that most of the food is plant-based. Not necessarily like vegan, not necessarily vegetarian. They do eat some meats, but it's very sparingly. But mostly nuts, legumes, beans, stuff like that, vegetables, fruits, of course. Um, and then occasionally meat and things like that, but it's very far in between, not like a daily thing. Um, and so in our cafeteria, we now offer at least the Blue Zones option every single day as one of our entrees. We have changed our beverages. So all this was done for a variety of reasons, but the main reason is to show our employees, the listed employees that they care, that we are trying to give them um, a good atmosphere again. We're trying to give them another reason why they would want to stay here. Yes, it's there's things that keep people in the door. You have great benefit packages. You have finances are good and things like that, but that may not keep people in the door. They like when they come in the door and they have they feel appreciated. They feel like they want to be um, recognized. And, I think this is one way of recognizing our employees by showing that we care. And we're trying to provide something that, we're encouraging them to take breaks. We're encouraging them to have standing meetings and walking, talking meetings so that, they can get their activity in, but they're still being productive. And productivity actually has been shown in all these areas to improve. So from a business standpoint, it's great too. Not only is it helping each individual employee, but it's also helping it's also helping the business grow and sustain good people, and that's what we want to see.
Well, it's interesting as I transitioned from KP, um, full time and working for Refresh Mental Health, and then more, into Four Corners. We've been talking about the idea of mental health or overall health, meaning physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health, being a lifestyle and not just an activity that you do, you know, in this particular location at this particular time, and then that's it. But it's how do I incorporate, and that's what I'm kind of hearing what you're saying is that OSF Blue Zone, adopting the Blue Zone template, right?
Yeah,
And that it's how to encourage and then provide opportunity for it to be a lifestyle, not just this one segment of a person's life. Is that accurate
yeah,
to say?
yeah, very true. Yeah, it's not a 4-week plan. It's not a do this and you can check it off your list. And you're good for your wellness for the year. It's something that's meant to be done on a daily basis. And again, doesn't have to be related to eating always. Doesn't have to be related to exercise. It could be something. For example, we have a downshift room, and this room is just a small office that's dedicated. It has, just soothing things in it, just dedicated for our employees to sit and just take a breather. If they need a stress reliever, that's what that's for. We have a reflection room too, and we have different areas like that. And we have a healing garden in the cancer center that helps those we call our employees mission partners to debrief, relax, gather themselves instead of trying to just push through it, push through it, push through it. Which I feel like, especially in healthcare, that's what the expectation is. A lot of times is, yes, you're stressed, but you have to push through and take care of the patients. Well, if you can't take care of yourself, eventually you're not going to give good care to the patients. And so that's a
Right.
good model too.
Absolutely. You had mentioned one of I can't remember exactly what word you used, but I'm thinking of one of the values, one of the key components of Blue Zones was a social aspect of it, and I think you said social networking, and
Mhm.
and then spiritual component. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit about, like, oh, I have lots of friends, and I'm on Facebook. I have tons of friends on Facebook. I'm on, and
Sure.
I have a feeling they mean something maybe a little bit different than that. So what do they mean by that aspect of uh, in these blue zones? What have they found the social aspect? What's important? What does that look like?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's not as easy as just having a ton of friends on Facebook, as you alluded to. It's actually having smaller groups usually. The research they did was finding that they had usually a good close group of 4 to 5 people that they would interact with on a daily basis. These are the people that you could call at any moment of the day for help, for someone to talk to go to. They're kind of like your second family. So some of the things, some of the Power Nine, again, the kind of attributes they're looking at in their research is right tribe. So that's what they're talking about with the friends, the very close friends. Family first. So you're still incorporating your family. So that's also part of your social niche. So you have your family, and then kind of the purpose aspect to it. Um, for example, here and kind of to put it more of a modern, I guess, what we do at OSF is we have moais. That's what they call them. Moais are like a group of people that come together for a common um, kind of common hobby or common interest. So we have walking moais, we have prayer moais. So the prayer moai would be more of the spiritual one, for example. So these people, the goal is for them to meet at least 30 minutes a week. So that could be like 2 times a week, 15 minutes a day. Again, this is during our work shifts, so we gotta figure out ways to get it in here and there. Um, and or 10 minutes a day, 3 times a week. But they'll say a couple of prayers. They'll reflect on those prayers, depending on how each group is ran. It's ran differently every time, depending on who the leader is. We have potluck socials where, again, once a week they meet. So it's kind of finding that camaraderie um, between people and having that, go-to person. People don't do well when they're isolated. That's when the mind, especially if you're in a dark place, you can't get out of that place I mean, maybe, but it's much harder when you don't have anyone to go to. Coming from obviously your background, it's good to talk about it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so, and if so, yeah, what they're finding basically is these people have a strong knit group of people their whole entire life. And some of them didn't always have it. They found it, and they were talking about some case studies they were looking at where someone had only a couple weeks to live, and then decided to just be more social, just be find a purpose in life, and be a lot more driven, taking care of themselves. That couple weeks of living turned into I can't remember, but it was roughly like 30 years. Like it was just unheard of.
Sure.
Yeah, and they have a documentary out in Netflix, so I think that story is mentioned in that documentary. But yeah, um, that's the kind of things that they're looking for. It's
Okay.
just common people you can talk to, and then those people that you can go to when you're in a crisis and you feel secure. That feeling of secureness, um, just the feeling of it will help you make the better decisions. You're not going to fall into negative thinking. So,
So so in my lens of thinking of it from a suicide prevention piece, which
sure.
which is the extreme end of that distress that happens, almost everything you're talking about, especially when you just talked about the social aspect of it and the purpose aspect of it, are what we refer to as protective factors. And
Yeah.
that though we're never going to be able to eliminate all risk factors, um, in the world, but the more that we can stack our deck with protective factors, it sounds like that has been a huge piece that the research they've done with the blue zones really is showing longevity. So that's an interesting piece. So because you're right, that's one of the big concerns, and I think research is starting to show that as we are coming out of the pandemic, but not everything um, has gone back to pre-pandemic way, meaning there's individuals that prefer working from home, but are they able to have that socialization, that interaction in the same way that they did in a workplace? Or when they've come back to work, has the workplace been just these little pods throughout, these little colonies throughout, and there's not the social interaction. We're just getting tasks done. And so I
Mhm.
know that that has been challenging for a lot of workplaces, that have been amplified as a result of the quarantining and the pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's kind of the purpose of the MOIs is trying to get you out of your little inner circle. And now you're instead of working with the same department, now you have this group where you're interspersed with anyone and everyone from the hospital. So it's like kind of spreading a wider net to talk to other people. And I think that has been very successful doing so.
You were mentioning, and you talked a little bit about prayer groups and the quiet room or the soothing room. Um,
Mhm.
when when you were looking through the research of blue zones and these different areas of the world that qualified or met criteria for blue zones, when I think of spirituality, I think a lot of people associate spirituality with religion. And I would just imagine that these different identified blue zones were in a variety of different parts of the world,
Mhm.
and then potentially influenced by different religions, that may have been, dominant in those areas of the world. So if you could share a little bit about what you leaned off of the research with this idea of spirituality that may, uh, cross over a multitude of religious practices and wisdom traditions.
Yeah, so in general, I mean, it's a higher being, someone that that there's something that's going to help carry you through. You're always going to get through this. Something that's going to be more important than yourself, type of thing, a greater good type mentality. That's kind of the mentality that they were going through. Some of the locations was in Japan, Greece, and Italy. So yes, very, very across the world. And yes, the spirituality slash religion was different across those. Um, but again, what they're looking for is I feel like the spirituality and the purpose kind of helped, because sometimes people, they do things in a certain way because of their religion. Like I want to do this in honor of, God or whatnot. Um, so with I feel like the spirituality we have purpose, and then we have the social. I think it also kind of ties those two together. So when you have trying to, it's very hard to explain actually. Um, so when you have those kind of trying to think of,
Yeah. Well, I think,
it's very hard
and
the word.
yeah, yeah, no, I totally understand. And I think when I think of in my life, in specifically, when I'm in that mindfulness and I'm having a conscious contact with God, as I understand him,
Yeah.
then there is that tendency there's an opportunity for me to get out of me. And kind of like, when I've talked about this numerous times about the exercise of individually as well as in a small group talking about what I'm grateful for, and it allows me to get out of Kevin centered and into other centered, and going from a
Mm,
closed minded to an open minded. And I think of the same way from a spirituality standpoint, is that it helps me. I was working with someone earlier today, and it was talking about this idea of being able to see their partner through God's eyes instead of my eyes, because then I'm seeing it from a broader perspective, and I think of, tying that into purpose and tying that into socializing, that when I'm isolated, I know how much mental and emotional anguish that we can have, because I'm not always I'm not always my best company because my thinking
Sure.
is not always my best company. And so having exercises, having intention about setting that up, to be able to, add it into my lifestyle, have it be part of my lifestyle, so that I don't default always to all about Kevin. I imagine that has some things that the researchers showed. That's
Showing grace, is
Yeah.
another, that's kind of the same perspective that you just kind of described. Showing grace is a huge one where, don't getting, they talked about not being stressed. Well, one of the main reasons they do is they do things all in the name of God, or they do things in the way that God would see them, or treat people the way that God would see them. So, if you're doing that, then the stress kind of goes away in a way. It's not on your shoulders. You're doing your best to go the way that, um, in this case, again, God had intended.
Yeah.
And um, like you said, you're out of your kind of, this is, out of my mind here and into the perspective that what would, in this case, what would God do? Um, so that you can continue making good decisions that don't weigh you down. Again, they're so focused on lack of stress at all these places. They did a whole bunch of interviews with all these people, and stress was not much of a factor. And here, obviously, there's stress every day in the modern society. And how do we get back to kind of living to less stressful? And the spirituality was a big one because, if you're doing things and you have that type of mindset, um, then the little things go away, or the little things don't, rub off the way they used to.
Mhm.
So,
Well, and I think that again, this idea of how do I develop it into, a lifestyle, not just a particular time of the week for a particular time of the day on that day of the week, that
mhm,
incorporating that into a lifestyle, and being able to, that when something comes up, maybe it's a fear, maybe it's a resentment, maybe it is, something that, a wound that I'm hanging on to. I know that that's a big part of what we look at, and that we talk about a lot, is that, um, even to the point where, I just recently spoke about that as I was working with my physical therapist regarding a particular ailment that I have right now. How do I invite nourishment into the part of my body that is, um, uh, causing the pain or wounded, instead of me wanting to have it removed? And
mhm,
instead of fighting against my body, how do I actually, mentally and emotionally, how do I help my body heal itself? And so that has been an interesting practice for a former competitive athlete, where that I thought
sure,
my body was a machine that was to perform for me. So it's a different mindset for me to, think about. And even lifting weights and exercise, how do I, I'm starting to try to view that differently. And it sounds like that is a big element of what they're finding out with the research with the blue zones,
right.
is happening in those areas. And then how do we incorporate into, well, in this case, an organization like OSF, to attract and retain, staff, so that you can bring the best services to the Rockford area.
Mhm. Yeah, and even, and it's a lifestyle, but if you're like, where do I start? How do I even do a lifestyle? Like doing those, like, hey, I'm gonna do this 3 times a week or 2 times a week. That is fine to start off with. Just make sure that you are growing and kind of finding the benefit of doing so. So I think a lot of times people have a hard time, taking in, oh, geez, lifestyle. Where do I even start?
Yeah.
So it's okay to start off with, having those little, again, check boxes where it's like, okay, I'll start here. I'm going to do this 3 times a week just to, you know, I'll make sure I pray 3 times a week at least, and I'll go for a 15-minute walk, whatever it might be, whatever your goals are. That's okay to start off with, just making sure that you don't see it that way as it goes along, and then you focus more on the benefits and why you're doing it rather than that you have to do it.
Yeah.
Again, kind of putting more on a positive spin than a negative spin.
Yeah, no,
So,
absolutely. Well, it is when I think of the difference between diet versus eating lifestyle, is that diet has a beginning and an end, and then almost always, what do we celebrate with? Going out to eat to
yeah.
get my favorite food that wasn't on the diet, right? And so,
Hmm.
and I know for me, when I've done that, when I would prepare for a bodybuilding show for 12 weeks and have this very strict regimented diet to get my body fat down as much as possible. And then we would always have this celebratory meal afterwards, but it wasn't just that night, it continued into the next. And now all of a sudden, everything is being triggered mentally for me. And I don't have the structure of getting ready for a show. So I'd have huge weight gains afterwards. And I wasn't the only one. There was a lot of us that would go through that and
Oh yeah.
and these yo-yos. And I think that is a microcosm of what happens when people are dieting, because it's about restriction. It's about all those things that you've been talking about. So, no, this is fascinating to me that I'm going to go and, kind of do my own, looking into it. And I'm
Sure.
very interested in that.
There's a lot of books.
So Adam, if someone was interested, either, hearing more about what you're doing, more about Blue Zones, wanted to get in touch with you individually, what would be the best way for someone to reach out and connect with
They can just email me at work. It's fine.
you? Okay,
My email is adam.j.shafer@osfhealthcare.org.
perfect. Well,
So,
Adam, I'm very appreciative that you were sharing your this interest and passion with Michelle, and then she
mhm.
shared it with me, so then we were able to connect. And I'm excited about learning more about this, and I appreciate you sharing this with our listeners. And I definitely uh, I I give a huge applaud to OSF for standing up and saying, this is how we want to make a difference with our community, for our community.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, as Adam was sharing and talking about this idea of what are those those actual areas that, as we call blue zones, what is allowing them to live longer, more well lives. If anything sparks an interest with you, I would highly encourage you to either reach out to Adam, do a little bit of your own research, and like Adam said, just starting moving in that direction and having an intention is going to move that needle, and you can build on it from there. As always, I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to being with you next week.